Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, and most particularly our discussion today of Oren Jacoby's astonishing documentary on Broadway. My name is Susan Booth. I'm the artistic director of the Alliance Theater, and selfishly, I am over the moon to be in conversation with the folks I'm about to be in conversation with, and to have had the opportunity to remember, celebrate, and revel in the power of live theater. So I'm going to introduce our speakers today, our panelists today. And here's the deal. If I gave you their full bios, we wouldn't have any time to talk. So I'll give you the short version of their bios, but do yourself a big fat favor, Google all three of them because it'll kind of knock you out. So I'm going to start with the bringer of the feast. Oren Jacoby, the director of our documentary on Broadway. He is an award-winning filmmaker, theater director. He is an Academy Award nominee for short film. He's one of those people that has so many hyphens, it's a little overwhelming for the normal people in the world. But he is a practitioner in theater, a celebrator of theater, and is the director of our film. Welcome, Oren.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to be here.
Wonderful to have you here in our virtual world. I will turn next to I'm going to call him one of the stars of the film, and that would be producer Jeffrey Seller. Jeffrey is he's going to hate this, I think, but he's a fabled producer. And that has everything to do not just with quantity, which is sort of extraordinary, but has everything to do with quality. This is the one theatrical producer, and I believe the only theatrical producer who has twice produced Pulitzer Prize winning work. He is the winner of 4 Tony Awards for musicals such as Rent, Avenue Q, In the Heights, and this up-and-comer called Hamilton. A remarkable man of the theater. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
And rounding out our panel, talk about multi-hyphenates, is the actress, the author, the being Tova Feldshuh. Tova's, I had to look this up because I wanted to be complete in my list. Her Broadway credits as a performer: Yentl, Cyrano, Rodgers and Hart, Dreyfus in Rehearsal, Sarava, Lend Me a Tenor, Gold's Balcony, Arena's View, and Pippin, where she was a trapeze rider, as I recall. Is that correct?
Full-out trapeze artist. Look, you hang an old bird singing upside down on a trapeze, you're bound to stop the show. So it's one of the great roles in my career.
And there it is. And there it is. And here we are. And so I'm gonna begin just to get us all into this conversation. I would love to hear from all three of you. I want to hear about your first audience experience of Broadway and your first practitioner experience with Broadway. And Oren, I'm going to throw it to you first.
My first Broadway experience. I'm gonna have to go to my most memorable one of seeing a Broadway play, of a great play with a great actor, and it was seeing Robert Ryan on Broadway doing O'Neill, and it was just seeing something that made me think, this is where I want to work. I want to work with in a world where people can hold a stage like that and communicate from the soul like that. And I think so that's my first sort of memorable Broadway experience.
Beautiful. Tova, do you remember your first experience as an audience member?
I certainly do. My very first experience in my life was I played Gretel in Hansel and Gretel in the kindergarten at Quaker Ridge School. And I kept kissing Jimmy Goodrich. And they said, if Terry Sue Felcher and Jimmy Goodrich don't stop kissing, they will have to leave the room. And I was the youngest in the grade. I was born December 27th, so I was about 4.5, almost 5. And we, of course, left the room. Then I followed that. My mother, it's very clear from Oren's wonderful film, a cultured person went to theater. I write this in my book, Lilyville, which is about my mother, Lily, who lived to 103. We had the albums of all the Broadway shows, and we listened to QXR. We were both classical pianists, but we were taken to a show. So for David's 10th birthday, and I used to just be 5 years younger than my older brother, David, but now I'm about 10. So I would say I was a zygote at the time. I went to see Gwen Verdon in Damn Yankees from the balcony, because in those days we could afford, we weren't running around rich. We were middle class. We could afford to buy tickets for all the kids. And I think 2 or 3 mothers in 3 cars. So there were 15 children. And I was there and I saw Gwen Verdon and in Damn Yankees. And I was stung. I just thought it was magical. And it's what we've all said. It was live. That's one thing about the great movie stars and some of the great TV stars. Some can cut it on a stage and some can't because it's live. And if you can't be heard and comprehended and understood, if you can't do that to an audience to engage them, it's not going to work. So she was just extraordinary. And the man who was the man who played the devil? No. Those were the good old days.
Was it Preston?
It was Ray. His first name was Ray, but I'll figure it out. Anyway, I was thrilled. It was Damn Yankees. And we then would go to theater. We went to theater all the time. I remember my mother took me to see Ethel Merman in Annie Get Your Gun at City Center. Because she said, my mother came from the Bronx. She said, everybody should see Ethel Merman. I mean, before they die, they should see Ethel Merman. So get over here and we're going to the theater. So we would do these cultural things. I wore my white gloves and I wore my anklets and my Mary Janes, and you dressed. You dressed for the theater. Helen Hayes was going to the backstage door in her mink at the time. You dress, and to this day, in the plays that I've had the honor of having the lead in or even Pip in a great supporting role, I do not let my children come to the theater in dungarees. And they're 37 and 33 now. I just say, this is mommy's place of work. You don't let me up to J.P. Morgan in my bike clothes, so forget it. So, so they wear what I call civilized clothes in this ever increasingly less formal society that we live in.
We will come back to that. Jeffrey Sellers, what hooked you? What was your first Broadway experience?
I was a senior in high school in 1982 in Oak Park, Michigan, which is the first suburb just north of Detroit. And like many families, I had never been to New York. We didn't have that kind of money, but a cousin of mine, my cousin Marty Singer, who was 13 years older and living in a suburb of New York, sent me a plane ticket to come visit him and his wife, Andrea. And he presented me a single ticket to see Dreamgirls the 1st of July in 1982, which was about less than 1 month after the famous Tony Awards, in which Dreamgirls and Nine battled it out to the end. And of course, Nine won. And first of all, that was the first time I ever sat in a theater alone and had that wonderful solitary experience of just being able to take care of myself and enjoy it for myself. And I sat in the first row of the mezzanine, and as I watched the propulsive, rhythmic, electric energy of that show play out, I don't think the hair on my arms ever came down. And then, of course, I was able to witness live Jennifer Holliday singing her song, And I'm Telling You I'm Not Leaving, at the end of Act 1, when she genuinely got a standing ovation at the end of the first act. I still say to this day, it was the best single experience I have ever had in the theater.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I want to do a follow-on. When did that translate into, I want to produce? That passion, that electricity?
By the time I saw Dreamgirls, I was already producing. I was producing my youth theater groups plays where I would pick the play that we were doing as the chairman of the play reading committee, which I've always said was my first step into becoming a producer, whether I was familiar with the title or not. When I said, who gets to pick the play? I want to pick the play. And then I was shortly thereafter, this is when I'm 13 years old, and I am writing the press releases And because I'm pretty good at calligraphy, I started to design the flyers and the programs. So I'm doing the marketing and publicity. And then as part of building a program, we go out to the local businesses to solicit program ads. And I figure that the day that I started selling program ads was the day I started raising money. So I was doing all of those things before I could drive. And then, of course, I was an actor in high school, and I did the Fantastics and the Pajama Game and all the different shows and Pfeiffer's People at the Thespian Society. But I had a macro vision, even as a teenager, about the entire venture. I wanted to make things. And what I learned is I wanted to produce things.
I love that. And part of that macro that, Oren, you point out so brilliantly in your film is New York is part of the macro. And I do feel like, being in the moment that we're in, we should stop and acknowledge for a moment that we are in a time of pause. We are in a time where New York is not at its full self, and therefore Broadway is not its full self. There's a fantastic quote, and I believe it was Tommy Tune, "Without the theater, New York is not itself." I want to talk a little bit about the coming back plan. Whatever day you happen to be watching this, know that the day in which we're having this conversation is the day that Governor Cuomo has announced a really unprecedented commitment to bringing the arts back in New York City. And I for one, was doing the happy dance around that. But I'm curious, Oren, Tova, Jeffrey, your sense of when New York comes back, when the theater comes back, which one will lead, which one will follow, and what will be the sign of light for you, the sign of it's coming back?
I was very encouraged to read, I think at the end of the year, the last week in December, Dr. Fauci said that if the vaccine program, if people take the vaccine, if it works, people really participate, and they continue getting vaccinated through July, I think he said, then people will be able to start to go to the theater theaters will open in the fall, was his optimistic pronouncement. So I think that's exciting that it could be that soon, that we're, in such a dark moment right now in January, where the pandemic is raging sort of at its worst, that we could really envision that within 8 months or 9 months that people could be sitting back in theaters is very exciting. I get my hair cut. My barber is in Times Square, and I was just down there half an hour ago, and it's a ghost town. There's nobody down there except for homeless people and cops. And usually, even this time of day, there are thousands of people going through Times Square. So it can't happen soon enough.
Jeffrey, what's your thinking?
I don't think that's good enough on the part of our federal officials and our state officials. Why can't we vaccinate 300 million people in 3 months? When New York had a smallpox outbreak in the 40s, they were able to vaccinate 6 million people in a matter of weeks. And I am angry about the rollout of this vaccine because the head of science for Operation Warp Speed said in a conference I attended on December 1st that they would vaccinate 150 million people in March, April, and May. That's 450 or 150 million vaccinations. That's 450 million shots, plus another 100 million in February. That gets you to 550. And then the shots they would do in January and December, meaning that by the 1st of June, they would have delivered 600 million shots. See, I'm going off on a tangent right now because I know you want to talk about when things are going to get good. But from my perspective as an employer of over 300 theater practitioners, I will start crying, who have not worked since March 12th, who have not had that livelihood. Every month is critical. I want to open this summer, but I will open when we reach herd immunity. And we all know that's the question.
Right.
One is herd immunity 75, 80, 85%? Fauci has said himself he has moved the goalposts over the last 2 months because he said, I don't believe people were ready to hear what I really thought 2 months ago. So now he's saying it's definitely in the 80 to 90 range, not the 70 to 80 range. And they also moved the goalposts on when we could open on the basis of the terrible failure of our government to roll out this vaccine. So now we will rely upon the Biden administration and our state governments to use the billions of dollars that Congress has just allocated through the most recent relief bill to get their act together. Because rolling out a vaccine is no different than sending out merchandise from Amazon, or me mounting, instead of one Hamilton company, 2 Hamilton companies. And then I tell my staff, well, guys, we're going to 4 Hamilton companies, and then we're going to 5. It's execution. It requires expertise, money, and skill. So let's do it. And then for me, I mean, I so look forward to the day that we have a renewal that I can stand in the lobby of the Richard Rodgers Theater and watch the audience team in. And yes, we'll put on our masks, certainly for the first few months, no question about it. And we can sit in that theater and watch the show. I feel like it will be a rebirth. It will be like Hamilton has opened all over again. And I don't know if that's going to be in August or September or October. On that, we will rely upon our officials to get us vaccinated.
I have some good news. At 701 Ann Avenue in the Bronx, my husband, who is in his 70s, was getting the vaccine. And I said, I'll just type in and see if I can register. And they took me. And the next morning, it dropped to 65. When I got to St. Anne's, in the cafeteria of that public high school, there were 50, I'm not kidding now, 50 administrators who were pharmacists and licensed nurses giving the vaccination. So I arrived for my 11:10 appointment at 20 of 11. I was taken, I have to say, within 10 seconds. I didn't go fancy. I didn't go to Mount Sinai and wait the hour and a half. And you're taken within 10 seconds. You meet the nurse, Priscilla Carter was her name. She explained they're all gloved. It was so pristine, Susan. It was so encouraging. And of course, it was the mosaic of America. It's the mosaic that we want back, that we had under Obama. And the adults are finally going to move back into government in a few days, thank God. And I wonder if the report from giving vaccinations was so inaccurate because it just came from this whole morass of lying being okay. The other thing I wanted to say is, as love is strong and hate is strong, trust is fragile, and responsible producers like Jeff, first of all, there's going to be an explosion of creativity. But surely when we go back, we're not just going to go back. Maybe Jeff has to seat us every other seat. Everybody has to wear masks. We have to see how that goes. Because if we re-incubate this damn disease, we're in the crapper. And my grandmother was British, so I have a British family, and the mutation there is really, really something. So I think we will go back, but I'm not sure we will go back like a throng. Maybe we have to, like physical therapy, walk up to it. And the minute the Broadway producers can sustain the salaries, seating half the house, I don't even know if this is possible. I'm just an actor. It's a beginning. I've been offered a great job this summer by Scott Schwartz out at Bay Street because they have to get an outdoor space. And at Guildhall in East Hampton, they had a dance concert, but it was on an outdoor stage. And to watch those dancers rehearse with their masks on, let me tell you, they were all over each other. It gave me I was concerned. And in the performance, they did not wear masks. And I just hope they're okay. So we have to creep up on it, but there will be an explosion, Susan. They say that endorphins are released just through being with another human being. that you don't always have to jog, and you certainly don't have to smoke pot. You can just be with another Homo sapien, and it raises your. So I was very encouraged. 701 Ann Avenue. Apply. What do you know? They may be taking infants like you, Jeff Sellers. You never know. So.
I think the common denominator, and for folks watching, a common denominator amongst all theater people is this phenomenon of opening night. And so if there is a time by which something must be delivered, then it must be delivered. It is not a negotiable deadline. And because that's baked into our DNA, we look to our leaders to behave in the same fashion. You mentioned, Jeffrey, I believe you mentioned how we're going to come back and an inflection point, or in something that you do really exquisitely in the film, as you talk about the different inflection points in Broadway. When did we fall in love with the latest hit from London? When did we fall in love with spectacle? When did we demand plays that were about something? When did this happen? And you tracked very wisely the material and then the audience that follows the material. And you know, I think about the complete sea change that Rent caused in the audience for Broadway. So here's my crystal ball question to you three smart people. When we return and we are doing what we do again, what is our next, and I'm talking content, what is our next inflection point on Broadway? What will we be talking about, and therefore who will be coming to see our work?
God, I hope we're going to be talking about the potential of the human being. I found the most discouraging thing as an artist, and I don't know if you feel this way, Jeffrey. You know, Avenue Q still had a human being, and it had Japanese no theater elements of it. When Disney started to come, and God bless Michael Eisner, he brought a lot of money into the city, and he revitalized the Amsterdam theaters, we know. But they wanted the actor not just to be the teapot, but to be covered by a teapot, to be anonymous. The actor should be anonymous. The neshama, the soul, that which lives forever from the human being, is covered by literalism. That, to me, was the most discouraging. If I wanted to be a teapot, I would like to do it. I would think that would be interesting. But to actually have a thing over my head and that the beast, you know. So I found that the beginning of my concern for the theater. And Diane Paulus's Pippin, she doesn't do any of that. She doesn't, you know, and we didn't have the Lion King. The Lion King was a breakthrough. But in Diane Paulus's Pippin, she used, it's a plane, she used the gifts of a human being, of what a human being could do. And I hope to God we key into the depth of the humanity of each of us and our potential, because we will have survived the plague. We will have survived a plague.
So someone asked me to dig into this question a little bit, and I did it as my first response to a lot of these kinds of questions, is to go back and to look at history. And one of the things that I was very, amazed to discover is the story about the plague in London in 1603. That the Globe Theatre and all the other theaters in London, which were a lifeblood of London society, the way that the theater is in New York, the way Broadway is in New York, they were forced to shut down for most of 1603. Then there was a let up in the plague, and then it closed down again in 1605, I think, end of 1604 to 1605. And Shakespeare, like everybody else, was out of work. He had a company of actors, but in those basically 2 years, he wrote over 7 of his most famous plays, of his greatest plays. He wrote Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, All's Well That Ends Well. My hope, and I think this is often borne out, is when artists when the pipeline is jammed and you can't get your creativity out, it builds up and then it comes pouring out. And so I'm really hoping that there will be a flood of new writing, of new playwrights. I mean, when I spoke with Jeffrey, and when we were starting out to work on this film, one of the things that people lamented is that just the economics of Broadway meant that there were fewer and fewer plays on Broadway, that the that musicals could now be in the small houses in Broadway. They were so much more lucrative than straight plays that people were, leaning towards doing musicals. And yet the season that we ended up by the end of the 2018-2019 season, which was the most successful season in Broadway history, there were more new plays. Not to knock musicals, but it was an important thing for Broadway that these new voices are coming and writing for the theater and writing for great actors to come and perform on Broadway. So my hope is that that trend will continue, but even be juiced by some more great writing that we haven't experienced in a while.
What do you think, Jeffrey? What's going to be our next inflection point, our next pivot?
Well, the fun part is we don't know. We never know from where the next rent will arise, from where the next Angels in America will come. I know I'm not going to be the inflection point. I don't know. I'm not going to say, oh, I want to do a play about this or that. I'm going to do what I do, which is, I guess I lead from behind. I follow the artist. I want to know what is on the mind of our extraordinary playwrights, composers, lyricists. And as they discover what stories they want to tell, I will be in a position with the ones that I've worked with over and over of saying, let's go.
We are lucky that that's how you work. Selfishly, there was a moment in the film that I was very happy to see, which was talking about the larger ecosystem of our industry and the role that the not-for-profit theater has in the evolution of Broadway work. It was also a profound reminder that once upon a time there were not workshops. That was interesting. But I'd be curious from any of the three of you to talk a little bit about what that partnership in its most ideal form. What is the partnership between commercial theater and the not-for-profit theater? How does it best work to serve the art and push it forward?
I can give the historical example that I'm most familiar with, because I happen to be going to drama school in New Haven, where there was a regional theater, the Yale Repertory Theater, and a drama school that was feeding the theater. And in the years that I was there, two great playwrights happened to have decided that Yale was the conduit, the place they wanted to work, as their laboratory, as the place where they could work most comfortably. And we're excited by having students around, and we're excited by having an artistic director in Lloyd Richards, who had committed his life to discovering new playwrights and encouraging theater, to find new voices. And those playwrights were Athol Fugard and August Wilson. And Athol had originally started working, writing his plays in South Africa, producing them with his own company of actors in South Africa, then often would go to London, and then began in the, 70s, bringing that work to New York and having it produced sometimes with a South African actor, but often with American actors. But by the 80s, he had started working exclusively with, writing plays to produce in the regional theater in America, and then some of those plays made it to Broadway. But August was really the man who committed his career to this idea of the regional theaters as a way to, in a way, replace what the out-of-town tryout used to be for shows in the 30s through the 60s, which is a place where he would go from theater to theater to theater around the country, and had a partnership with a number of nonprofit theaters at Yale, at the Huntington in Boston, at the Mark Taper in LA, and several others. And the plays would get better and better. I mean, they were wonderful to begin with, but he would refine them and keep working on them. And this was a way that allowed these theaters to share in the artistic process and allowed those audiences to participate, because it was a two-way street. He was learning from the audience as much as he was learning from seeing the actors do it over and over again. And the result is this incredible body of work, which I think is unparalleled in the American theater, that he wrote those 10 plays that existed partly because of this system of the nonprofit theater that allowed him to do it that way. And then Broadway came forward, and even though they weren't all smash hits, monetary success is committed to seeing that those audiences got the imprimatur of Broadway and were done in New York where people could see them. So that's a great, example of how it could work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I came from the Guthrie, and I don't know what I would have done without Rep or any safe space. I was in Yentl. It was my first marquee at the O'Neill Theater. And we were invited down to the public theater because Michael Bennett had put together a piece and they were having a final dress rehearsal. And we sat on the floor. I remember I myself was like in a leotard top and, in rehearsal clothes. And we watched a chorus line on the set. It was mind-boggling. And the protection and having to raise my children, and I'm married almost 44 years and have a good marriage, a good, alive, loving marriage. I had to become an expert in the one-woman show genre so I could control when I needed to be at Collegiate or Spence or when I could be on the stage. I had much more control doing Goldust Balcony than, let's say, Pippin. But by the time I did Pippin, the children were finished with college. So what I wanted to say is, where was the safe space? Well, Manhattan Ensemble Theater under Dave Fischelson. We were in some basement on Mercer Street rehearsing Goldust Balcony, and then it went to Broadway. Yentl was at the Chelsea Theater Center at BAM under Bob Calfin and Michael, huge producer, whose last name just escapes me at the moment. And Irena's Vow started at CUNY down off. So my biggest successes and the most comfortable successes have happened from off-Broadway or a sheltered, protected area. Likewise, when I do my nightclub act, what do you think? I just open at 54 Below? You out of your mind? You go to New Hope. You go to whomever will give you a job to try it out and see if the audience is... the audience helps you hone your work. And as Jerry Zak says, the way to make something brilliant is take out all that which is not. So that's what God bless him, that's what I learned from him. Yeah.
Jeffrey, how's it played a role in your work?
I'm going to start at the beginning, which was that when my then business partner, Kevin McCullum, and I were working on Rent, we could not have done Rent without New York Theater Workshop. But here's the other truth. New York Theater Workshop could not have done and would not have done Rent without us. Because Rent was more than twice as expensive as any show the workshop had ever produced before. And Jim Nicola said his board would not come up with the money. So we made this partnership where we would do the show together. We would give them the difference between what they can afford and what it cost. And then in return, of course, we would own the physical production and have the commercial rights. And then that became the model that we followed. And then we worked through, how do we collaborate in a way that is productive and respectful so that messages to the author and the director are clear. And I think Jim and I forged a terrific partnership in that regard that served Jonathan and served Michael.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't say Jonathan without.
No, I know.
Without remembering.
But the field owes you and Kevin and Jim an enormous debt for making sure that we got to see a remarkable light that didn't get to burn long enough. And we did because of choices you made. So thank you. I would love to just listen and learn for the next hour, but I've gotten a blinky that says I should probably ask a final question. And so here's my final question. And if you can, I'd love something from recent memory. Share with us a moment where Broadway gave you joy. It could be something you saw on stage. It could be a conversation you had with a remarkable artist, but we haven't been able to have the firsthand experience for 10 months now. And so refresh it for us and share with us a moment where Broadway, its artists, its vivacity gave you joy. Anyone?
I'll jump in, because when you said that, I just went right back to my last experience going to Broadway, which was in it was early December of 2019, and I went to see The Inheritance. And I went with a group of friends, and that play started with those 8, 10, 12 men on the perimeter of a table stage. I just went, and I leaned in, and it never let go of me for those 3 hours. And it thrilled me and stimulated me and challenged me and made me enjoy that dinner that led me right back for part 2. I can't wait to have that experience again.
I can't wait to be shoulder to shoulder to people, but we mustn't. We must be 6 feet apart, then maybe 4, maybe 3, conservative. I just got my first vaccination yesterday, and I'm not. It must have been right before they changed the rule, because when they accepted me, I was so shocked, and then the next morning they made the announcement, and they still said we must wear a mask. We have to socially distance. On March the 5th of last year, I sang in Houston, February 22nd. Thank God I had a big concert. Took a plane there, took a plane back with my musical director. Probably caught COVID somewhere around there, because I was sick by March 9th. But on March the 6th, sorry, we live next to Gabrisky Airport and the National Guard. We live next to the National Guard. Yeah, we should have been called, but never mind, never mind. Okay, so I saw 6 on that Friday night and loved it, and saw my friend Janice Kaplan, a fantastic author, and I've just written my first memoir, Lilyville, Mother, Daughter, and Other Roles I've Played, about seeing the world through the lens of my 103-year-old mother and her relationship to the theater, to culture, to art, and to my going to the theater. When I asked to go to Juilliard, she said, "You're not going to a trade school." So that's how that discussion went, and I went to Sarah Lawrence and majored in philosophy. Anyway, I went to see 6. And I was enthralled, and I saw Janice Kaplan going to the theater, and we threw our arms around each other. By the Saturday and the family bat mitzvah at Emmanuel and then Danielle, we were up to elbows, and there was a buffet, and I was with the head of cardiology of Cornell Weill, and he said, at least 10 to 20 people in this room have COVID. He said it then. And we all started, we then eventually a lot of us got sick, because we didn't know what it was and how lethal it would be. And I was fine. I had 3 lousy days and never was hospitalized. But 6 was illuminating. And on the 12th, March 12th, I had tickets to the Lehman trilogy. And my family was coming with me. I had 5 tickets, and we had 4 tickets, and we had 3 tickets. Then I was the only one who was going to go, because I was taking a chance. It was probably inappropriate. And guess what? They shut the theaters. March the 12th, Thursday, March the 12th, those theaters shut, and none of us have been able to work live truly since then. Also, I should say, even though this is another point, SAG has made a new rule about its health insurance, which is heinous, which is that we have to earn $25,000 by March 31st or April 1st live. In other words, I have to get a couple of episodes of television, etc. Anybody less than $25,000 will not be covered by health insurance after June 30th. Ed Asner, all the older actors who have given our lives to this union. So it's affected everybody.
Yeah. But I want to close on joy.
Yeah.
So Oren,
Okay,
I'm pointing
so-
to where you are on my
All right, I'll see
screen.
what I can do. I'm going to cheat and give you 2 moments of joy.
Good.
And they were 2 of my not my last, but 2 of my more recent experiences on Broadway that were, really transported me. And they both happened to be, I think, at the Belasco Theater. One was the David Byrne American Utopia, which, being a child of that generation and that music and the joy. I mean, it's music that's about joy, and that was it's not your typical Broadway show, but it definitely tapped in and was someone who was a rock and roll performer who figured out something about what it took to make a theatrical experience work and really engage with the audience. And it was, everybody was on their feet for a good part of that show, and it was just a very, very moving, communal theatrical experience to be there. But the other one, and I'm going to do this as a little bit of a plug for the movie for those of you who haven't seen it yet, there was a very unusual performance on Broadway. It was one night only. Ian McKellen was in New York and did a performance that he had done for his, I believe, 80th birthday. He'd gone to 80 theaters around England and performed a one-man show describing his life in the theater. Which of course included several extraordinary performances on Broadway, among them Amadeus, which was his debut. But he performed Shakespeare, he performed excerpts from his plays, but he was really telling us about what it was to be a working actor and how he felt, what that life had been like going from play to play to play, and what he'd gotten from the live experience that we all miss right now. And that's something that stayed with me through these months, and that, like everyone else here, we can't wait to get back. So it is the joy you can only experience there with that crowd of people around you, and the sort of electricity that happens when you're engaging with something that you couldn't have ever imagined. As Jeffrey said, we don't know what the next exciting one is going to be. We just know that, we have to try to be there because it's so exceptional.
Let me say, I know we have to close, but I want to say one of the most joyous moments I've ever had, was being in Pippin, and being, as a person in her 60s, given the opportunity to do a full-out trapeze act and remind me of when I was 3 and 4 years old in my backyard in Scarsdale and would hang upside down from that little bar on my swing set. So that quantum leap that the human being and the artist can make in the opportunities that are given us by great works of art says to the audience, if I can do this, think what you can do. If I can do a full-out trapeze act in my 60s, hanging upside down, singing No Time at All, think what you can do. So the transformational actor, the idea of service before self, is what we can give back to our beloved audience.
That is gorgeous. That is gorgeous. I thank all of you. I thank you for your time today, but far greater, I thank you for the transformative impact you have on this art form. Tova as a generative artist, Jeffrey as a producer of exquisite taste, Oren as a capturer of this most critical story. I am so grateful. And I would say to those of you tuning in, I'm a big believer that we should always ask, well, what can I do? If you too miss losing yourself to hours of theater, if you miss the communal joy, and if you miss the witness of great mastery, agitate for the vaccine, be smart with all the safety protocols, move us to that moment where, as the great God Fauci says, we can safely rejoin, because Broadway is all of us. It tells all of our stories, and we all miss it. So thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Oren. Thank you, Tova.
Thank you.
Thank you, AJFF. And if you haven't seen it, and if you have, watch it again on Broadway. Bye all.